If someone had told Jack Thornhill 6 months ago that he'd be representing humanity in a galactic diplomatic crisis, he would have laughed so hard he'd probably spilled the cheap whiskey he was pouring for the regulars at O'Malley's Bar and Grill. It's funny how life works out. For the 17th time, I was just a bartender. Jack sighed, adjusting the too tight collar of his hastily tailored diplomatic uniform. I have a bachelor's degree in communications that I used exactly never. And my greatest diplomatic achievement was preventing a bar fight between two plumbers arguing about football. The stern-faced General Hoffman didn't seem impressed. You were selected by the Galactic Council's compatibility algorithm. Thornhill, out of 7 billion humans, their system identified you as having the precise psychological profile needed for this mission. Their algorithm must be broken, Jack muttered. The fate of Earth depends on you now, Hoffman continued, ignoring Jack's comment. The transport arrives in 5 minutes. Don't screw this up. Jack stared at his reflection in the polished steel wall of the military base. Disheveled brown hair despite his best efforts, perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, and bags under his eyes that told the story of a man yanked from obscurity into the spotlight. At 36, he'd settled into comfortable mediocrity. Now, apparently, he was Earth's last hope. The ship that arrived wasn't the sleek, chrome vessel Jack had expected from sci-fi movies. It looked more like a floating office building with engines all utilitarian angles and bureaucratic beige. As Jack boarded, a holographic figure materialized before him. Diplomat Thornhill, it said in a perfectly modulated voice, I am Ada, administrative interface and diplomatic assistant. Welcome aboard the Galactic Council mediator vessel. Your presence has been highly anticipated. At least that makes one of us, Jack replied. The journey to the Council station took 3 days, during which Ada attempted to cram decades of galactic political history into Jack's thoroughly unprepared brain. By the time they arrived, he understood the basics. 3 powerful species, the militaristic Skrill, the hyper-logical Pelori, and the emotionally volatile Blobulons, were on the brink of war over mining rights to a star system rich in rare elements. Earth, having just achieved faster-than-light travel, had stumbled right into the middle of the conflict zone. The Galactic Council station resembled an enormous snowflake made of glass and metal, spinning gently against the backdrop of unfamiliar stars. As Jack stepped off the transport, a small delegation awaited him, 3 aliens of vastly different shapes and a towering humanoid with blue skin who introduced himself as Grand Arbiter Exolian. Human diplomat Thornhill, Exolian said, his voice deep and resonant. You arrive at a most critical juncture. The representatives of the 3 species await in the conciliation chamber. They have agreed to one final round of negotiations before military action commences. And if these negotiations fail? Jack asked. Solian's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. Then war begins in 14 Earth days. Your planet, being in the disputed territory, would almost certainly be destroyed in the crossfire. Collateral damage, as your species might say. Jack swallowed hard. No pressure, then. Indeed. Zolian agreed, missing the sarcasm entirely. No pressure would be physically impossible in this environment. Now, shall we proceed? As they walked through the station's soaring hallways, Jack couldn't help but notice the looks he received from passing aliens' curiosity mixed with what might have been pity. Clearly, nobody expected much from the primitive human diplomat. Hell, he didn't expect much from himself either. The conciliation chamber turned out to be a perfectly circular room with a round table in the center. 3 beings already sat at the table, as different from each other as creatures could possibly be. Jack took a deep breath and stepped forward to meet the aliens who held Earth's fate in their various appendages. The alien to Jack's left looked like someone had crossbred a velociraptor with a tank. Standing nearly 7 feet tall with metallic scales and eyes that glowed an unnerving shade of orange, Commander Vrex of the Skrill managed to look menacing even while seated. Jack's briefing had called the Skrill militaristic, which was like calling a supernova a bit warm. The human arrives, Vrex announced, voice like gravel being crushed. We expected someone. Larger. Sorry to disappoint, Jack replied. We left our professional wrestlers at home. To Jack's right sat what appeared to be a slender humanoid composed entirely of crystalline structures that shifted colors with each movement. Ambassador Lunara of the Pelori tilted her geometric head, the crystal facets of her face refracting light in mesmerizing patterns. "Fascinating," she said in a melodic, synthesized voice. "Your response employs humor as a defense mechanism against perceived intimidation. Typical emotional deflection technique catalogued in 17 sentient species." "Great to meet you too," Jack muttered. The third alien defied easy description. Prime Minister Gloop of the Blobulons was essentially a 6-foot-tall, semi-transparent sack of viscous liquid with several floating organs visible within. Multiple tentacle-like appendages extended from its main body, and its face was a constantly shifting pattern of pigments that currently displayed what Jack interpreted as extreme annoyance. "This delays the inevitable." Gloop's voice boomed, despite no visible mouth. The Blobulons feel great distress at these pointless talks. "Indoor voice please," Jack winced, ears ringing. Grand Arbiter Zolian gestured for Jack to take the empty seat. As per Galactic Protocol, each party will now state their position on the matter of the Epsilon Eridani system. Commander Vrex slammed a clawed fist on the table, making it shudder. "The Skrill position is clear and logical. We discovered the system first. We placed the first monitoring beacons. By right of discovery and strategic necessity, the 14 planets belong to the Skrill Empire." Lies. Gloop's body pulsated an angry red. The Blobulons sensed the unique elements first. "Our emotional connection to the star system predates all others. We feel it belongs to us." Lunara's crystalline form shimmered with subtle blue patterns. "Both claims are irrelevant. Pelori astronomical archives clearly document the system's characteristics dating back 3,427 standard years. Our scientific claims supersedes your military posturing and emotional attachment." Jack watched as the three representatives descended into what was clearly a well-rehearsed argument. Vrex growled about strategic necessity and military might, while Gloop's colors shifted rapidly through a spectrum that Jack suspected represented the alien equivalent of having a tantrum. Lunara recited statistics and historical precedents with machine-like precision that somehow managed to sound smugly superior. After 20 minutes, Jack raised his hand. Nobody noticed. He tried again, standing up this time, still nothing. "Hey!" he finally shouted, his bartender voice cutting through the cacophony. All three aliens stopped mid-sentence and stared at him. "Sorry for the interruption, but I'm trying to understand the real issue here. What exactly are you all fighting over in this star system?" The three representatives exchanged looks that somehow conveyed the universal concept of, "Is this human serious?" "The Epsilon Eridani system contains 14 planets rich in quantum stabilized neutronium," Lunara explained as if talking to a child. "Q essential for advanced technology including faster-than-light travel, energy production, and weapons systems. And it makes the most beautiful emotions when properly processed," Gloop added enthusiastically. "It wins wars," Vrex stated flatly. Jack nodded slowly. "So it's valuable to all of you, for different reasons. Why not share it?" The silence that followed was so profound that Jack could hear the soft hum of the station's life support systems. Then all three aliens began talking simultaneously, explaining in various ways why sharing was absolutely impossible. "The Skrill do not share strategic resources," Vrex declared. "It is not our way. Pelori efficiency models show that divided resource management leads to suboptimal utilization in 94.3% of cases," Lunara stated. "Blobulons cannot share emotional connections to celestial bodies. It would be like sharing a heart." Gloop's body rippled with distress. Jack rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. The Grand Arbiter looked at him with what might have been sympathy. "You begin to understand the nature of the problem, human diplomat Thornhill," Zolian said quietly. "These species do not merely disagree, they fundamentally cannot comprehend each other's perspectives. The Skrill view everything through the lens of strength and strategic advantage. The Pelori value only logic and efficiency. The Blobulons make decisions based entirely on emotional responses. And somehow I'm supposed to get them to agree?" Jack asked. That is why you were selected," Zolian confirmed. "Your species is uniquely, adaptable. Humans combine elements of all three approaches in your decision-making. You understand strength, logic, and emotion. Jack looked at the three aliens, who had resumed arguing with each other. He'd broken up enough bar fights to recognize when people, or in this case, aliens, weren't really listening to each other. Traditional diplomacy clearly wasn't going to work here. He needed a different approach entirely. We're taking a break, Jack announced, standing up and using his best "I'm cutting you off" bartender voice. The aliens fell silent, clearly surprised by the interruption. This meeting is scheduled for another 4 hours, Lunara pointed out, her crystalline form pulsing with what Jack was beginning to recognize as irritation. The Blobulons were just reaching emotional crescendo, the gloop protested, rippling dramatically. The commander Vrex simply narrowed his orange eyes. "Ilusan, this is so. Burbo. The human lacks authority to dismiss us." "I'm not dismissing anyone," Jack clarified. "I'm suggesting we change venues. This formal setting isn't working. Where I come from, the best negotiations happen in relaxed environments." Grand Arbiter Zolian tilted his blue head. "What do you propose, human diplomat Thornhill?" Jack grinned. "I want to set up a bar." The next few hours were a blur of activity as Jack leveraged his new diplomatic authority to requisition supplies and space. He had a vacant conference room transformed into something resembling a casual Earth bar, complete with comfortable seating, subdued lighting, and most importantly, a variety of alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages suitable for each species' biology. "This is highly irregular," Zolian commented as he observed the transformation. "That's kind of the point," Jack replied, arranging bottles behind a makeshift bar. "These three can't agree on anything in a formal setting because they're stuck in their official positions. We need to shake things up." The Galactic Council has attempted 473 different negotiation formats over the past standard year, Zolian pointed out. None have succeeded. "Did any of them involve getting the representatives drunk?" Jack asked. Zolian blinked his 4 eyes in sequence. "That would be a negative." "Then we haven't tried everything, have we?" Jack finished setting up and admired his handiwork. It wasn't O'Malley's, but it would do. "Send them in, one at a time. I want to talk to each of them privately first." Commander Vrex arrived first, ducking slightly to enter the room. The Skrill looked around suspiciously, taloned hands never far from what Jack assumed was a weapon. "What is this place?" Vrex demanded. "It's called a bar," Jack explained, offering the commander a seat at the counter. "It's where humans go to relax, socialize, and occasionally solve problems. The Skrill do not relax during negotiations. It shows weakness." "Actually," Jack said, pouring a glowing blue liquid that the station's database had assured him was compatible with Skrill biology, "where I come from, refusing a drink is considered a sign of weakness. It suggests you're afraid of losing control." Vrex's orange eyes narrowed. "The Skrill fear nothing." He snatched the glass and downed the contents in one gulp. Jack hid his smile and poured another. By the third drink, Vrex was leaning against the bar, explaining the intricacies of Skrill honor duels. By the fifth, he was confidentially telling Jack about the political pressure he faced from the Skrill High Command. "If I return without securing exclusive rights to the system, my career is finished," Vrex admitted, his normally harsh voice slightly slurred. "And possibly my life as well." Jack nodded sympathetically. "Sounds rough. Let's talk about that more tonight. For now, I need to meet with the others." Ambassador Lunara proved more challenging. The crystalline Pelori refused all beverages. "Unnecessary chemical intake reduces cognitive efficiency by 22.7%, she explained. "Fair enough," Jack conceded. "But humor me with a different experiment." He placed a simple puzzle box on the counter, another requisitioned item. "This is a human logic puzzle. I'm curious if a superior Pelori mind can solve it faster than the average human time of 3 minutes. Lunara's facets shimmered with interest. "A simple test of logical reasoning? Very well." 30 minutes later, the frustrated Pelori was still working on the puzzle, which Jack had specifically chosen because it required intuitive leaps rather than pure logic. As Lunara struggled, Jack casually asked questions about Pelori society and the pressure she faced regarding the negotiations. The consensus expects a 100% favorable outcome, she eventually admitted. Anything less will damage my standing and potentially affect my genetic legacy authorization. Sounds like a lot of pressure, Jack remarked. Maybe we can find a solution tonight. High Minister Gloop was the easiest. The emotional Blobulon practically gushed with excitement at the novel environment. The Blobulons approve of this colorful place. It stimulates many positive emotional resonances. Jack offered Gloop a drink specially formulated for Blobulon physiology, which the alien absorbed directly through its membrane. The effect was immediate. Gloop's colors shifted to a calm blue, and its volume decreased considerably. That feels soothing, Gloop said. Now speaking at a normal volume, the Blobulons rarely experience soothing. Our emotional states are typically intense. I noticed, Jack said dryly. Tell me, what happens if you don't get the star system for your people? Gloop's colors darkened. Then I have failed my clutch mates. The emotional devastation will ripple through our collective for generations. I will be the disappointment ancestor. Jack nodded, beginning to understand the real problem. None of these representatives could afford to compromise without losing everything. That evening, Jack sent formal invitations to all three aliens for what he called an informal cultural exchange. He had no idea if his plan would work, but traditional diplomacy had already failed. It was time for humanity's secret diplomatic weapon, getting people to relax, drink, and actually talk to each other. What is this small circular object? Gloop asked, tentacle hovering over the green felt table Jack had set up. It's called a poker chip, Jack explained, arranging stacks of colored discs in front of each alien. We're going to play a traditional Earth negotiation game. The three representatives had arrived precisely on time, each visibly uncomfortable with the informal setting. Jack had dimmed the lights, played soft background music, and prepared specialized drinks for each species. Commander Vrex was eyeing the Skrill equivalent of whiskey with poorly concealed interest, while Ambassador Lunara studied the poker table with analytical intensity. I fail to see how games facilitate diplomatic resolution, Lunara stated. That's the beauty of it, Jack replied, shuffling cards with practiced ease. We're not doing diplomacy right now. We're just playing a game and getting to know each other. On Earth, some of our most important deals happen over cards. The Skrill understand battle simulations, Vrex said, taking a seat and immediately reaching for his drink. Is this a war game? Something like that, Jack said, dealing the cards. The game is called poker. It combines strategy, probability analysis, and reading your opponents. I think you'll all find something to appreciate in it. Teaching three aliens to play poker proved easier than Jack had expected. Vrex was drawn to the aggressive betting, Lunara quickly calculated probabilities, and Gloop became fascinated with the bluffing aspect. 2 hours and many drinks later, the atmosphere had transformed. Vrex had removed parts of his armor, Lunara's crystalline structure displayed relaxed color patterns, and Gloop had settled into a comfortable puddle shape. And then Gloop was saying, colors swirling with amusement, the Grand Emotional Council said we couldn't proceed because the emotional resonance was inappropriate. Vrex made a sound that Jack realized was laughter. Your Emotional Council sounds like the Skrill War Committee. Last cycle, they vetoed my battle plan because it wasn't aggressive enough. Bureaucratic inefficiency appears universal, Lunara commented, arranging her cards methodically. The Pelori consensus required 16 analysis cycles to approve my appointment to this negotiation. Jack nodded sympathetically. Sounds like all three of you are dealing with some serious pressure from back home. Crippling pressure. Gloop agreed enthusiastically, raising the bet with a splash of tentacles. The Blobulons have already composed the songs of victory or lament that will commemorate my return. The Skrill High Command has made it clear that failure is not an option, Vrex growled, matching Gloop's bet. My predecessor was reassigned to frontier duty after failing to secure a minor asteroid belt. Lunara's facets shimmered. The Pelori consensus has calculated that my genetic contribution would be reduced by 87.3% if these negotiations fail. She paused. I had hoped to produce offspring next cycle. Jack dealt another round of cards, letting the conversation flow naturally. As the night progressed, he introduced more Earth customs drinking games, ridiculous toasts, and increasingly personal questions that the slightly intoxicated aliens were surprisingly willing to answer. So none of you can go home without exclusive rights to this star system? Jack asked during a break between games. Precisely. Gloop's body rippled. The emotional attachment my people have formed cannot be severed without catastrophic emotional consequences. The strategic calculations are absolute, Vrex added, pouring himself another drink with surprising dexterity given his clawed hands. The Skrill Empire's defensive perimeter requires those resources. Pelori efficiency models are unequivocal, Lunara stated, her voice slightly less precise than usual. Optimal utilization demands complete control. Jack leaned back, watching as the three aliens representatives of species on the brink of war continued to play cards together. They weren't friends, exactly, but they were talking, actually talking, not just reciting prepared positions. You know what's funny? Jack said, refilling drinks all around. You three have more in common than you think. Preposterous. Gloop protested, though without real heat. Really? Jack continued. All three of you are being crushed by expectations from home. All three of you face personal ruin if you fail. And none of you has the authority to actually compromise, do you? A heavy silence fell over the table. Vrex stared into his drink. Lunara's colors dimmed. Gloop's tentacles drooped. The Skrill High Command has issued explicit instructions, Vrex finally admitted. No compromise is permitted. The Pelori consensus would never accept a sub-optimal solution, Lunara agreed quietly. The Blobulons would experience collective emotional collapse, Gloop added. Jack smiled sadly. So we're all just going through the motions here, aren't we? None of you can actually make a deal. The three aliens exchanged glances, seeming to truly see each other for the first time. Perhaps, Vrex said slowly, there is a certain honor in facing worthy adversaries. The logical conclusion appears inevitable. Lunara's crystal structure dimmed further. The emotional resonance is complex, Gloop observed. Jack dealt one final hand, an idea beginning to form. It was unorthodox, probably against protocol, and possibly career suicide, but it might just work. One last game, he announced. Winner takes all. Jack woke up with his face pressed against the poker table, a splitting headache pounding behind his eyes. Fragments of the previous night filtered back, slowly teaching aliens to play quarters, Vrex's arm wrestling with Gloop's tentacles, Lunara calculating the perfect angle for throwing cards into a hat. Oh God, he groaned, lifting his head. What time is it? Approximately 6 hours since you lost consciousness, human diplomat Thornhill, came the precise voice of Grand Arbiter Exolian. The formal negotiations resume in 20 minutes. Jack squinted up at the blue-skinned alien. Did any of them say anything before they left? They departed together, discussing something called hangovers and expressing concern for your well-being, Exolian replied. I must note that your methods are highly irregular. Yeah, that's kind of my specialty. Jack stood up unsteadily. I need a shower and about a gallon of coffee, or whatever passes for it around here. 18 minutes later, looking marginally more presentable in his diplomatic uniform, Jack entered the conciliation chamber. The three alien representatives were already seated, each looking slightly worse for wear. Vrex's orange eyes were dimmer than usual, Lunara's crystal structure seemed less brilliantly refractive, and Gloop was a more muted shade of green. Good morning, everyone, Jack said, keeping his voice deliberately low. I trust you all enjoyed our cultural exchange last night. The Blobulons experienced many new emotional states, Gloop replied, mercifully at a lower volume than usual. It was educational, Lunara conceded. Vrex simply grunted, which Jack took as positive feedback from the warrior alien. Excellent. Then let's get down to business. Jack took his seat and looked at each representative in turn. I believe I have a solution to our problem. All three aliens straightened, suddenly alert despite their apparent discomfort. After speaking with each of you privately and observing your interactions, I've come to understand the real issue, Jack continued. None of you can return home with anything less than complete victory, correct? 3 nods, 1 reptilian, 1 crystalline, 1 gelatinous. And yet, we've established that you're all reasonable beings who understand that war would be catastrophic for everyone. The Skrill are prepared for war, Vrex stated, though with less conviction than before. The Blobulons would emotionally survive, Gloop added, colors swirling uncertainly. Pelori probability models account for all contingencies, Lunara said quietly. Jack leaned forward. But what if there was another way? What if, instead of one of you winning and 2 losing, you all could claim victory? That is mathematically impossible, Lunara objected. The resource is finite. I'm not talking about the resource, Jack clarified. I'm talking about perception, about how this agreement is presented to your people. The 3 aliens exchanged glances, and Jack could sense a shift in the atmosphere. Last night's informal interactions had created a foundation, however tentative, of mutual understanding. Explain, Vrex demanded, but his tone was curious rather than hostile. Jack was about to respond when the chamber doors slid open with a hiss. A Skrill officer rushed in, moving with alarming speed for such a large creature. The Commander Vrex. The officer barked. We have detected Blobulon ships entering the buffer zone. They appear to be positioning for attack. Before anyone could react, a crystalline Pelori aid materialized through another door. Ambassador Lunara, Pelori sensors indicate Skrill battle cruisers have activated weapons systems and are moving toward Blobulon positions. Gloop's body suddenly pulsated with angry red patterns. The Blobulons detect deception. You planned this aggression while engaging in false diplomacy. The carefully cultivated atmosphere of cooperation shattered instantly. Vrex leapt to his feet, hand moving to his weapon. Lunara's form shifted into a more defensive configuration, sharp crystal edges suddenly prominent. Gloop expanded dramatically, tentacles whipping through the air. Prepare for emotional warfare. Gloop thundered. The Skrill Empire will crush all opposition, Vrex roared. Pelori defense systems are activating, Lunara stated coldly. Jack looked frantically from one alien to another as the situation spiraled out of control. Grand Arbiter Zolian stepped forward, his expression grave. If hostilities commence, the Galactic Council must withdraw from the conflict zone, he announced, including from Earth's solar system. You will be left to your fate, human diplomat Thornhill. Wait, Jack shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Everyone just wait. To his surprise, the aliens paused, turning to look at him. This is exactly what your superiors want, Jack continued desperately. They've been pushing for war all along. Think about it, they set impossible conditions for each of you, knowing you couldn't compromise. They're using you as an excuse to start the war they've been planning anyway. The Blobulons would not, Gloop began, then paused, colors shifting uncertainly. The Skrill High Command has been eager for battle, Vrex admitted reluctantly. The Pelori consensus's probability models have shown unusual biases, Lunara said slowly. I had attributed the statistical anomalies to calculation errors. Jack seized the opening. You're all being manipulated. Last night I saw 3 individuals who could actually talk to each other, who understood each other's positions. Now your war-hungry bosses are forcing your hands before you can find a solution. The chamber fell silent as the 3 representatives absorbed his words. Jack held his breath, watching the subtle signals passing between them, a shift in Vrex's posture, a flicker in Lunara's colors, a ripple across Gloop's surface. What do you propose, human? Vrex finally asked. Jack exhaled slowly. Something completely unprecedented. Something that will shock your superiors so badly they won't know how to respond. This is completely insane, General Hoffman muttered, watching the broadcast of the signing ceremony from Earth's hastily established embassy on the Galactic Council station. It actually worked. Jack Thornhill, now officially Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, straightened his formal diplomatic attire and grinned. Never underestimate the power of human diplomacy, General. On the screen, Commander Vrex, Ambassador Lunara, and High Minister Gloop stood side by side, each placing a mark on the historic document, the Epsilon Eridani Cooperative Management Treaty. Behind them, representatives from their governments looked stunned, clearly blindsided by the unprecedented agreement. "But how did you get them to agree to share the system?" Hoffman asked. "Everything in our briefings said these species were fundamentally incompatible." "That's the beauty of it," Jack explained. "They're not sharing, at least not according to the story each is telling their people." He pointed to the screen where Vrex was addressing the Skrill delegation, describing how the treaty guaranteed Skrill security forces would have authority throughout the system, protecting all operations from external threats. "The Skrill are telling their people they're in charge of security for the entire system, which they are. Say to them, that's victory." The broadcast switched to Lunara, who was explaining to the Pelori delegation how all resource extraction and processing would follow Pelori efficiency models and oversight. "The Pelori are telling their people they control all the technical operations and resource management, which they do. To them, that's victory." Finally, the broadcast showed Gloop, whose body was pulsating with vibrant colors, as it addressed the Blobulon representatives, describing how the emotional resonance of the system would be preserved under Blobulon stewardship. "And the Blobulons are telling their people they're the cultural and spiritual guardians of the system, which they are. To them's victory." General Hoffman shook his head in disbelief. "So they're all claiming they won?" "Exactly." Jack smiled, and in a way they all did. Each species got what they actually cared about most, while giving up what mattered less to them. The Skrill don't care about efficiency metrics as long as they're in charge of security. The Pelori don't care about who has boots on the ground as long as everything runs according to their specifications. And the Blobulons just want their emotional connection to the system recognized and respected. "And Earth?" Hoffman asked. "Earth," Jack said proudly, "gets to host the neutral administrative headquarters for the joint operation, bringing jobs, technology and protection to our system. Plus we get a small percentage of the resources as payment for our essential administrative services." On the screen, the three alien representatives were now standing together with Jack in a historical photo opportunity. To anyone watching, it looked like three fundamentally different species had somehow found common ground. What nobody except Jack and the representatives knew was how much that common ground had been built over poker chips, alien alcohol, and shared complaints about unreasonable bosses. "You know what the real diplomatic breakthrough was," Jack said, watching his alien counterparts on screen, getting them to realize they had more in common with each other than with their own hardline leadership. They all faced impossible expectations from home. They all personally wanted to avoid war. And they all were being used as scapegoats if diplomacy failed. The broadcast ended, and Jack prepared to return to the reception. General Hoffman stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. "The President wants to know if you'd consider a permanent appointment as Earth's ambassador," Hoffman said. "Apparently your unorthodox methods have impressed the Council." Jack straightened his tie, thinking about how far he'd come from pouring drinks at O'Malley's. "Tell the President I accept. On one condition, I want to design the embassy myself. And it's going to include the best damn bar the galaxy has ever seen." 6 months later, the neutral ground, the informal name for the diplomatic lounge in the Earth Embassy, had become the most popular gathering spot on the Galactic Council station. Species that had never communicated now mingled over drinks, games and music. Diplomatic breakthroughs were becoming a regular occurrence, often announced after what station personnel had taken to calling Thornhill sessions. In a quiet corner, Jack sat with Vrex, Lunara, and Gloop, who had all become regular visitors despite their official duties elsewhere. "The Blobulons have a new emotion named after you," Gloop informed Jack, its colors forming the alien equivalent of a smile. "It translates roughly to unexpected harmony through chaos. The Pelori Diplomatic Academy has added human disruption theory to the curriculum. Lunara added, a crystalline structure displaying amused colors. It is now considered essential training. Brex grunted, then raised his glass. The Skrill simply call it the Thornhill maneuver. It is now taught to all our negotiators. He looked almost embarrassed as he added, there is talk of a statue. Jack laughed and raised his own glass to human diplomacy, proving that sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to stop talking about it and just have a drink together. To human diplomacy. Bloop boomed enthusiastically. Around the bar, dozens of different species, some former enemies, others long-standing allies, raised their various drinking vessels in response. In the great cosmic scheme of things, humanity was still a newcomer, technologically outmatched by almost every other species in the Galactic Council. But as news spread throughout the galaxy about the strange human approach to negotiations, one thing became abundantly clear. They said diplomacy would prevent war, but they had no idea what human diplomacy looked like, and the galaxy would never be the same again.